Hi everyone, my name is Ellen Clark, and the article I chose for this round was How and When Did You Learn Your Languages? Bilingual Students' Linguistic Experiences and Literacy Instruction. This article was written by Manka Deanna Brooks. Manka Deanna Brooks does have her PhD, so she is a doctor of education. She currently works as an assistant professor of reading education at Texas State University in the curriculum and instruction department. Her work as a professor centers around literacy and diversity. Her aim is to improve literacy instruction and create effective learning environments for linguistically and culturally diverse students. Her research goes around very similar practices. She really focuses on the literacy development of bilingual and biodactyl adolescents who have difficulty meeting literacy demands of secondary education. So, her work in this article is all focused around a 10th grade student and a language survey. The article starts out with a girl named Elizabeth telling about her dynamic at home. Her dad speaks English and Spanish. Her mom speaks more Spanish but understands English, and her brothers speak both. She's identified by her school as having the home language of Spanish because you can only identify a single home language on school records. That being said, that identity of a single home language of Spanish does not accurately represent her everyday reality. She's not speaking a whole lot of Spanish at home. If her educator was to solely rely on this information on her record, they would miss the opportunity to make connections and build on her current strengths of other people around her speaking English as well. So then we go into talking about some of the perils of relying exclusively on native language designation. So most educators assume that students' native language is the first language they used. We do not often acknowledge that students can be bilingual as a first language. Usually, when we ask parents at the beginning of the year or when their child enrolls in school what language they use when they begin to talk, it does not give parents the possibility that the child was learning two languages simultaneously. So we're already pigeonholing kids who have a diverser experience than what we can provide on that survey. One of the quotes that I really appreciated from this article was an individual's linguistic environment does not necessarily remain unchanged from the beginning moments of when he or she first acquires language. That being said, divorce, the adding of siblings, moving, all of those outside of control factors can influence a student's linguistic experience. So the language they use can be changed based on where they're living, based on who they are surrounded with. The linguistic experience of our students should not focus on the static linguistic identities of students, but rather understanding their diverse language experience. All of our students are not experiences are not traditionally available to us because the home language surveys that our schools give are not always conveying accurate information for us. So, what Manka did was she created a 6-question survey and a blank space for students to turn their responses into a paragraph. Again, this was aimed at secondary ed students, so students who are in high school and above. She notes in here that the survey may need to be adapted, translated, or read aloud, and it's very useful for the beginning of the year. So, questions 1 or 2 are about learning language and languages spoken at home. So, the first question she asks is when and how did you learn your languages? Having the S on the end of languages leaves it open ended and allows for discussing multiple ways students can become bilingual. So, we're giving students that opportunity to tell us that they learned 2 languages at the same time. It also allows us to distinguish between students who are recent bilinguals, who are maybe learning English recently or learning Spanish recently, and those who have been for most of their lives. Question number 2 goes into which languages are spoken in your home. It purposely avoiding suggesting any family relationships, as all students' living arrangements are different. So it's not necessarily just that family nucleus, but realizing that most students who come from bilingual backgrounds don't always have a typical home situation. This question gives educators an up to date information of their home life and what can often be missing year to year if records at the school are not updated. Questions 3 and 4 go into interactions with adults. So, question 3 is which languages do the adults speak in your home? And question 4 is which languages do you use with adults in your home? This allows for the understanding that there could be many norms between different adults. So, like Elizabeth's story at the beginning, where her dad speaks Spanish and English, she noted that she could speak either with her dad, but she spoke Spanish with her mom. And that was because her mom was more comfortable in Spanish. And so, a lot of the times, the expectation is to address someone in the language that they know best. So, we're allowing students the opportunity to tell us which languages they speak with the adults in their house. Questions 5 and 6 go into the language that they use with their peers. So, which languages do you use with the young people in your home? And the last question, outside of your home, which people do you speak with the most? What languages do you use with them? Children reported making different choice of language with their siblings than with their parents. So, the young people in their home being brothers, sisters, cousins, whoever is living with them, usually they use a different language with them than they would with their parents. Interactions with the peers that they have on question 6 are often governed by social norms, so they can differ from the language that they use with adults. We see this a lot of times on social media with the language that kids use, LOL, JK. Those started as social norms between peers and slowly evolved into kind of a social media language. So, with the survey that she gave for this research, her main subject was a 10th grade ELL student named Jamilette in California. The student had a detailed behavior record and held a 2.23 GPA, so there was some room for growth. She completed the survey as part of her Spanish for Native Speakers class. Her response to the survey was as follows. My first language I started talking at home was English when I was 12 years old. I learned a little bit of Spanish with my uncles. The language I use at home are English and Spanish. The adults in my house speak English and Spanish. I use English when I talk to adults. I talk English to teens. Outside my house, I use the language English. I typed this as it was written, as she transcribed it, so there are some missing periods and capitals, but that is how it was written. Um, when we analyze Jamlette's response, we can see that she explained she was hesitant to speak Spanish because her family and friends made fun of her when she made mistakes. According to her school record, however, she was a primarily Spanish speaker. Her responses led to a conversation that her mom was incarcerated, her nuclear family was sharing a house with her extended family, and her father remarried, and all of that impacted her home linguistic environment. She wasn't speaking Spanish except for the uncles that came in and started living with her after her mom was incarcerated. This survey obviously opened a lot of doors into explaining Jamlette's behavior and her record and gave her teachers an eye-opening view into how she views herself and how she uses language every day. Again, none of this information was on her official school record, but could really help her teacher when identifying what she needed to teach Jamlette the most. So the most important slide would be the impact for us and our classrooms. So you could give this survey to your own students. If you were teaching younger students, you could give it to parents because it provides a source of information for us as the educator to better design instruction to connect with students' actual language experiences. So increasing our ability to bring in multimodal and multilinguistic titles that will tie into our students' linguistic experiences. rather than following just their classification of Spanish speaking primarily at home, we can engage literacy instruction that is tied to our students' lives. This better helps us understand how our students are bilingual, how they become bilingual, and it gives us a deeper understanding of their experience. So, learning Spanish when you're 12 is very different than learning Spanish when you're also learning English when you're 3 or 4. This also is a good reminder that our students are more than what is in their file. We can make more linguistically informed decisions the more information we have about students. So, what I really took from this article was just being aware, starting those conversations with our students of what is the language at their home and what do they speak with their peers and the adults around them. And all of those questions can really give us some good insight into what our students are dealing with outside of the classroom. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something.